Hey, welcome to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes. I love video conversations. Who doesn't? Of course, that's the only that's what we have right now is video conversations. And of course, here to join me, if you don't know him already, if you don't know him, you should know him. It's Jacob Rongholt. Jacob, how are you? Welcome back to the show. Actually, the first time guest, so welcome to the show. Period. How are you?
Yeah, it's my first time, and I'm glad to be here. I'm doing really well. Just got off work, so I'm ready to talk some sports here. And this is kind of funny. You've been on my show about 4 times, and then this has been my first time. So I'm glad to be part of the Rude Dog family.
No, I appreciate that. And you can chalk that up to guys like Charles Woodson and Eric Davis, and the list goes on and on and on. So welcome to the clan. Welcome to the clan. Appreciate having you on, Jake. I know you're busy. You got a lot of stuff going on, but let's kind of jump into this because last night there was a lot of debacleous play as a part of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Probably, and I hate to say this, but they showed to be the weakest link, at least not only in the AFC, but in the NFL in regards to the unbeaten teams. And I know that there have been other people talking about how the Steelers were the weakest team who's undefeated. Of course, the only team that's undefeated up until yesterday when the Washington Football Club came into Heinz Field and basically put a bunch of can whooping all over the Steelers. Look, a few points here. There was nothing disguised. There was no surprising runs. Jalen Samuels had very few touches. Snell had very few runs. It wasn't very effective. They didn't fool anybody. It wasn't disguised as a run. No real play action to speak of, at least not from what I seen yesterday. And what was missing was James Conner, who's continually battling injury, but at least was able to give them some type of diversity when he was on the field. What did you see from this would-be running back by committee for the Steelers last night?
I'm kind of surprised at what has been happening with this running game, especially when Benny Snell is actually coming from a pretty good running program like Kentucky. And then you got Anthony McFarland Jr., who was like a breakout star with the University of Maryland. He comes over to Pittsburgh and he doesn't know what he's doing. And I think that's also on the offensive coordinator, Randy Fichtner, right now. It just feels like this offense is just too one-dimensional. They can't run the ball effectively. They're a little too predictable. When you got Ben Roethlisberger combining for 104 pass attempts in the last 2 games, that is where you're going to be pulling the panic button and saying to yourself, look, do we need another coordinator? I mean, the Ravens are having issues with Greg Roman right now. So if Greg Roman's job is on the line, why can't Randy Fichtner here? Because it just kind of feels like while they do have a lot of talent, they got Ben Roethlisberger, it just feels like this team is unfinished. And it's kind of surprising that they would have the record that they do.
Well, what was really interesting is that, and this was something I was talking about yesterday. Of course, I'm all over Twitter. You can follow me at Rude Dog Reyes. But we're talking about how this was a very one-dimensional game. You hit the nail right on the head there. There was nothing really super outstanding from this team. Lots of drop passes, lots of dropped opportunities, and those dropped opportunities are missed opportunities, those that you could have easily scored on. And so, you know what, we're going to take this game by storm, which they had done in the first half of this matchup against Washington Football Club leading into halftime. But it was a very slim margin. It wasn't as if this was a monstrous 35-point rigmarole over the Washington Football Club, who had started with Alex Smith, who just only 1 year ago, was he out with a knee injury, torn apart into itty-bitty pieces, and now Humpty Dumpty put him back all together again and making the Washington Football Club look really good. However, when you look at the NFC and you look at the tiebreakers that they're going to have to fight through, they don't have one. Why? Because the New York Football Giants had taken care of that early on in the regular season. So where does the Washington Football Club rank right now? Well, that really depends on the rest of the NFC least, because at least we know someone will end up winning that part of the division in the NFC. What did you see from the Washington Football Club, and more importantly, Chase Young?
I see that Ron Rivera has done an excellent job rebuilding this team so quickly. I mean, the best thing of what he did in Carolina was he's able to turn a defense to one of the top. Luke Kuechly. Now he has his Luke Kuechly with Chase Young, and Chase Young is a terrific pass rusher. He was one of the best that the Big Ten has had in the last 25 years. He led the he led the conference and college football in sacks. So that's exactly what Ron Rivera wanted to do. But it's not just that. They have dealt with injuries throughout the time. Ryan Kerrigan hasn't played a full season. Now he's back. But Cole Holcomb really did an amazing job being able to shut down the middle of the field. That's one of Big Ben's best assets to being a quarterback, is able to, scan the field and then find that middle. And he was able to shut that down beautifully and be able to keep them from getting long yardages and keeping it down to short yardages and forcing third downs. So what I really loved about the Washington football team is that this is a defensive first team. They have the best pass defense in the NFL for a reason. They are terrific. They have a great chemistry together, but it's also this offense. Now it's starting to come together. The offensive line is starting to build together. Antonio Gibson is starting to wake up here. I mean, the rookie out of Memphis, he's had a couple of great games. And then Alex Smith. And this is the main factor to why this is the team to beat in the East. They have a legitimate quarterback who has been in multiple playoff games, who doesn't know how to turn over the football. And yesterday, to do that against the best defense in the league was huge for the Washington football team. And in fact, Alex Smith might have just cemented himself as the comeback player of the year.
When I look at the defense, I look at Ron Rivera, who, by the way, is also dealing with post-cancer, situations within his own body. So he's able to fight through the adversity that he personally is contending with. And on top of that, trying to build his football team where they should have been probably 7 to 10 years ago, at least, if not longer. You can ask Fred Smoot about that one. I had Fred Smoot on the show earlier in the season. We were talking about name change and what they should be called, what they're not called. Look, right now they're called winning. And right now they're winning. When you could beat one of the best teams in the NFL, the last undefeated team, who, by the way, to all credit, to Ron Rivera, he knew what he was doing from the onset when they drafted Chase Young. This isn't something that he all of a sudden pulled out of his hat and said, you know what, I think we're going to be a huge passing defensive team. Yeah, that's it. No, he had a plan coming into this former Redskins, now Washington football team situation, where now they're contending with the rest of the NFC East in regards to where they land, where they're going to be. Are they in a pecking order? Do they have playoff chances? Do you have playoff conversations? I don't know that we're going to have those conversations quite yet. I guess it really depends on what they do through the regular season and what their opponents do within that division in order to determine whether or not Washington moves on and gets a playoff bid. That really is the bigger question. I think not only facing Ron Rivera, but really facing this very young and talented Redskins defense, and more importantly, Gibson's dealing with turf toe. So it's just a question as to whether or not that toe gets better or it gets worse as the 5-6 remaining games left on the Redskins schedule. We're going to find out is it going to be running back by committee? Does Gibson get back? Does he handle the turf toe? I don't know. Turf toe is not something you just all of a sudden get rid of. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. And it's not something that's put on a stat sheet. You can mention the ACLs and the MCLs and the torn ligaments and things of that nature, but nobody wants to talk about the turf toe because most people are like, you're laughing about a toe. How dare you? It's not even a stat. But to be honest with you, it affects players' mobility with cuts, jump cuts, slides to the left and slides to the right. So we're going to find out if Gibson is going to be ready to go, if he's good to go. I think what really led to the Steelers' unsettled loss, and I call it unsettled because they have a lot of things to contend with. Joe Hayden's out in concussion protocol. You have Marquise Pouncey, which could be back, as well as Steven Nelson also could be back from the injury list. Just a side note, Des Bryant, before this game, what was played between Baltimore as well as Dallas, and I know you're looking at your phone for updates, is that he had caught COVID, and so he was dire to play against his former team, and the lack of offensive production. You can go through all the barrels if you want to. You can unlid them all you want. The bottom line is he wanted to play against his former team to show them that, hey, I'm still the guy. I still can do what I do. And he tweeted that basically he's done for the season. Now, I don't know if emotions ran high in that. I would assume it probably would. And I know it would with me if I had a chance to put some payback on the field and show my former team that I still got it and I could do this. So I wanted to throw that in there right now. So he is inactive in this particular game. No other players were impacted, just an FYI for those that are listening. This is Rudy Reyes and Jacob Rongholt on the Rude Dog Show. The Steelers themselves didn't really give themselves a fighting chance offensively. Ben, that ball was too cold. I don't know if it was an arm problem. I don't know if it was an elbow problem. I don't know what the problem was. All I know is that you missed opportunities. You replace, a field goal kicker at the last minute because he had a hip problem with the guy who's basically brand new, newbie right on the block, was able to make whatever field goals he was asked to make. And that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy, but he was able to really respond to that. I think he did well outside of not having Chris Boswell on the field. However, offensively, this was just a snail's pace, but the Steelers still have more sacks in the NFL than any team. So that's certainly something to look forward to. Getting guys out of COVID/injury protocol, also very clean, very keen to watch those guys in the next matchup against the Buffalo Bills, who are just on a tear. And last night they looked fast, they look hot paced, they look like they're ready to shoot out of a cannon with almost every single weapon that they have, whether Stephon Diggs or Josh Allen out of the pocket with a scramble, with his football IQ, getting it down. It's an uphill battle for the Steelers. We're going to find out what they're made of and what their medal is going to look like when it's all said and done. Do they get the dub or do they get the L? We're going to find out there. I want to kind of segue into that. Speaking of coaches, Mike Tomlin has not had a losing season since became the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, nothing below 500, which is a feather in his hat. However, when you look at other coaches in the NFL, you know where I'm going with this. You got a lot of players right now who are looking at their coaches for the leadership, for the type of leadership that they really need to have. Unfortunately, it's not happening. Guys like Anthony Lynn, Adam Gase, Vic Fangio, Matt Nagy, Doug Peterson, Pete Carroll, and we're going to talk about Pete Carroll last because I think that there's a reason why he's not going anywhere anytime soon, but he should be on the hot seat. What's your thoughts about Anthony Lynn with the LA Chargers, and what's the deal? You got Herbert there. He seems to win a couple of games for you. Then all of a sudden you get blown out and zilched in your last matchup. Why is Anthony Lynn not on a hot seat yet, or is he?
He's on the hot seat, but the Chargers don't do that. They don't fire people at the middle of the season. They're not the Detroit Lions. They're a team that is ran by Tom Telesco, and he knows that this team needs to win a couple of games. Otherwise, Anthony Lynn is going to be fired at the end of the year. That's why they call it Black Monday. I always say when it comes to teams that fire people in the middle of the season, it has to rhyme with Zions or Balkans, and that will make a lot more sense to me. So the Falcons firing Dan Quinn and the Lions firing Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, that makes sense. Bears, I could see Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace also not living out the season, or they possibly could. I mean, Ted Phillips, team president, is possibly thinking about retiring at the end of the year. So maybe they just might wait till Black Monday and then just fire them all on the spot and go from there. There are some people out there that should be fired right now. Doug Marrone, look, I believe that you've done an admirable job with this team, but you have 11 losses, and you can't do that, especially when you're going to have a brand new general manager and a brand new quarterback that's going to be coming in, because Gardner Minshew is expendable. But, Jake Luton is going to be a practice squad player somewhere, and, Mike Glennon's going to be back on retirement. So that's another one. And the problem with Anthony Lynn is that he is all about running the football effectively. And when he can't run the football effectively, that really hurts him, because then you can't be able to predict. Try this again here. It just becomes too predictable. But, give credit to the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. He's done a great job, and a possibility he could be the new head coach for them, because he has such a great synergy with Justin Herbert. But Anthony Lynn just doesn't, because keep this in mind, Anthony Lynn had problems with Justin Herbert even during training camp and even in the first couple of games. The only reason Justin Herbert got his shot was because Tyrod Taylor has a punctured lung. If Tyrod Taylor didn't, I bet you Justin Herbert would not be what he is right now, and probably would have waited till at least 8. So you have to find that head to pass first, ask questions later. And Anthony Lynn is just not that guy. He's a great guy. He's a good coach at times, but this just doesn't feel like a good marriage.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think Anthony Lynn's tenure within the Chargers organization has already hit the ceiling. He's already reached the pinnacle of who he is as a coach. Now, if he comes back being an offensive coordinator, a defensive coach, whatever manner that is, let that be the case. Unfortunately, I don't think he's head coaching material. I still don't think he's head coaching material, and I probably never will think he's head coaching material. But look, you have a lot of talent. And the first mistake that they made was letting Melvin Gordon go, who's extremely productive for them, now productive for the Denver Broncos. As an organization, Denver Broncos probably not very productive when you look at the miscues, when you look at Andrew Luck's play. And, there's a lot of just magnanimous types of things that are going on there. But the next coach that really should have already been fired outside of Doug Williams, and where I'm going with this, has got to be Adam Gase. Adam Gase has always had a less than 500 record. I'm not a fan of his coaching style. I'm not a fan of the fact that he can't sit still in a chair like I'm doing right now and actually have a conversation with somebody. His eyes have to wander everywhere. His body's always in motion. Something is just not right. And I think that type of demeanor, he stated himself that he's the one who fired Greg Williams. Now, I don't know that to be accurate or inaccurate, but he did say it. However, he should learn how to maybe take his own criticism and fire himself. I don't think that it was very fair to let a guy named Doug Williams go when it's a zero blitz, letting Derek drop back and basically just chuck that thing down to an open receiver on the sidelines. That is not what you do. I think they wanted to cement getting Trevor Lawrence. Well, Doug Williams may have wanted him, would have done absolutely nothing with him. Why? Because he's a defensive guy. He's not an offensive guy, but he got what he wanted anyway, maybe fired out of New York. But I think Adam Gase and the organization as a whole really needs to look at this seriously. More so the organization, the ownership needs to look at Adam Gase's record. You just got to go. First of all, you draft Sam Darnold in 2018. You don't give him a ton of protection. Now he's scrambling for his life. Then he gets sacked, and then he throws interceptions because of the pressure and the O-line can't handle. Look, this is not Sam Darnold's fault. He entered this situation because they drafted him. He didn't send them a letter saying, I know your O-line is trash, but draft me anyway. It just doesn't happen that way. What are your thoughts about Adam Gase in New York? Is he gone by the end of the year?
Yeah, he's gone. He was gone from week one. Joe Douglas Eagles. He was with the Eagles. Joe Douglas knows what he's doing. Give him time with this and understand he is evaluating this roster. If he decided to fire Adam Gase after week one, then that would have been a problem. If you decided to fire him at week 8, that would have also been. He's trying to evaluate this roster, this coaching staff, and say to himself, okay, what do we need work with? We have $75 million to spend in free agency. We're gonna have a high draft pick. We're gonna possibly have quarterback Trevor Lawrence, because one of the things about a general manager is that when he comes into a place where the coach is not his, where the quarterback is not his, he is going to be able to hitch a star to that draft pick and see if he can lead him to the promised land. It happens all the time. That's how Brett Veach was able to, have Patrick Mahomes, because John Dorsey did such a great job trading and getting him in there. But that was Brett Veach's pick. And that's why Veach became the general manager for the Kansas City Chiefs. The same thing with the Green Bay Packers, even though it's Aaron Rodgers' team right now. Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst believe that Jordan Love is the future for this team because, Rodgers just turned 37 years old. So this is going to happen. The problem with Adam Gase, and I'm glad you brought that up, is his unwilling loyalty to terrible hires. I don't understand why he continuously gives Dwell Loggins a job, or he continuously gives Greg Williams another shot. I mean, Greg Williams is one of the worst defensive coordinators. He's a guy who cheated his way with the New Orleans Saints and was telling players, I'll give you this amount of money if you take out Brett Favre, if you take out Kurt Warner. It ended Kurt Warner's career, and the Saints paid for it. They got fined. They got suspended. I mean, Sean Payton was gone for the year. The Saints fell apart because of that. And since then, they have not been able to rebuild the way that they wanted to because of what happened. That's why the Saints have never got to the Super Bowl again. They just never had They just never had that luck at this point. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who was ranked 29th in defense. They don't have anybody on this team. I believe it's not going to make it next year. Maybe Marcus May. Maybe that's about it. I mean, they had Frank Gore as a running back, and Le'Veon Bell is gone. He's at Kansas City. LaMichael Pirine, the rookie out of Florida, he hasn't really done much. Tyrell Johnson, I've never even heard of this Tyrell Johnson. Comes out of nowhere, has a great game against the Raiders, but that was about it. So everybody just needs to understand, look, put yourself in the shoes of a Jets fan. They are looking at it just like I believe it. They are evaluating the roster, figuring out who needs to go, who can stay, who can be traded, who can I use as a trading chip, and who can I bring in to bring back the faith in the New York Jets. So give it time. This is a 1-15, 0-16 team in the making, and Sam Darnold possibly will be traded.
I think so. There's a lot of key points you really hit on, and a lot of other teams actually that kind of fall within those types of parameters. You look at Doug Peterson, you look at the Lorries and the connection there. They years ago they hired basically a go-between in order to help build this franchise, because Laurie is the money guy. And then you have Peterson, who's a coach, right? So he knows player management. Obviously, player mismanagement. Of course, Jalen Hurts does get to start this Sunday over Carson Wentz, which you're just throwing another log in the fire. That's a whole nother story. And we're going to talk about him next. But when you look at the New York Jets, it just stands to reason why this team continues year after year after year after year of complete and utter failure. You have to get rid of Adam Gase as an organizational restructuring. You have to recognize that there are certain core pieces you can release, but you need to build up. How are you going to protect Sam Darnold? With an O-line. What do? You draft O-line guys. You want defensive guys. You got to put the money where your mouth is, and that mouth needs to be on the field with these guys who get drafted in a high sense.
And that's a great point. But look at what Joe Douglas already did in the draft. He drafted Mekhi Becton, the stud offensive tackle from the University of Louisville. That's his guy. LaMichael Pirine, that's his guy. These and Denzel Mims, these are guys that Joe Douglas wants to keep for the next 5 to 10 years. So he is going to hitch his star to those players because he believes they have a future. I mean, Denzel Mims actually looked pretty decent against the Raiders. So there is hope for this. But like I said, they got to get rid of the McCagnon guys and the John Izek guys. And that's the focus right now. So Joe Douglas has a lot of work to do with this team, but at least he has a couple of players where you look and go, oh, I see. That's why he was so good. That's why Joe Douglas has such a great resume. John Izek never did. Mike McCagnon, I don't think he had a vice president job with a football team. It just came out of nowhere. This actually looked like a hire that actually made sense for the future, especially with that salary cap.
Right, and they're going to have to battle through that big time. You mentioned Becton. That guy is a staple on that offensive line. If that's a guy you want to work around, that is the guy you want to work around. Then you get other guys in the other side of the line. All of a sudden, now you have a pocket that any quarterback's going to get drafted is going to be happy with. Say, thank God you got me what I needed so I can execute, have the time in the pocket, scramble if I need to, and clear those passing lanes for running backs. And they don't even have a running game, for crying out loud. It's running back by committee for that team too. Adam Gase needs to go, end of story. Let's move on here. Vic Fangio. And look, I understand he's a defensive guy, defensive mentality. Elway's number one guy. He wanted a little old school. And look, Vic Fangio is not new school, nothing new school about him. He doesn't even care for analytics. Okay, I understand that. Is he the wrong hire in Denver? I think so. I believe so. One thing I do agree about Vic Fangio is that they look extremely competitive. I mean, last night was a pure example of how you stay on top of a team like Kansas City, who by no means are going to be lay down, throw down guys with no pass rush. He did great jobs on both sides of the ball. The problem that I have is that Drew Lock is not being coached up. You either need a new quarterback coach or you need to find someone. And it's kind of like who goes for the chicken or the egg comes first. Does Fangio go? Does Lock go? How many failed quarterback drafts has John Elway had? Way too many and more than I can count, and throwing money out the window, at least that many. The problem that I have with Vic Fangio is that he's not an offensive-minded guy. And whether or not the Drew Lock worked out in the offseason to refine his craft, that remains to be seen. All I've seen from him is throwing balls into double and triple coverage, forcing the ball to be picked off, and then nothing worse than giving up points to that team because of that pick. I honestly think Vic Fangio is probably going to be on the hot seat. If he isn't already, I don't know, but he should be. I don't know about him leaving, though. I'll be honest with you. When I look at Vic Fangio,
Well,
he's
but
such a
the fact
likable
is,
guy, but he's not getting
yeah,
anything
he
done in
is.
Denver.
And he has an amazing resume. If you see what he did with the Niners and the Chicago Bears, it's going to continue. So even if the Broncos decide to keep Vic Fangio as a defensive coordinator, that's huge because they actually are a very good defense. But I mean, there are going to be football teams out there that are going to be canning their defensive coordinators left and right. And Vic Fangio is going to be a blue chip guy. So they're going to have to, bring out the Brinks truck for him if they want to keep him because, teams like Packers is a good example. Jacksonville, Dallas is going to be looking for somebody. San Francisco could possibly bring back Fangio because if Robert Saleh is a head coaching candidate, he's going to be picked off really quickly. So Vic Fangio, I don't know if he's going to stay in Denver. And you brought up a great point. This is the second offensive coordinator they have brought in now for him, Pat Shurmur, and he's doing his best. But unfortunately, it's just not enough. And you bring up John Elway again. I love John Elway. He's the second greatest quarterback in NFL history to me, always will be. Best thrower of the deep ball I've ever seen. But I mean, if you really want this Denver Broncos team to be something, either find a way to build this correctly or put in your walking papers and go play golf because this is got to stop. You haven't won anything since 2015. You've gone through numerous quarterbacks. Do we have to go back to the Brock Osweiler disaster that it was? Oh. Brock Osweiler, you had Case Keenum. I mean, I remember last year when Case Keenum, he was like talking about him and he's like, all right, we got our guy. You really, Case Keenum was your guy? The best you could come up with? So John Elway has kind of a make or break year coming up here, and I'm very curious to see what the Broncos do.
Yeah, that's going to be quite interesting offseason to say the least. Who they offload, who they keep, who's going to be who, what, when, how, and why. You're going to have to gut certain positions and actually beef up those. So there's going to be some turnover there. Last but not least, I want to talk about Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy's kind of a mystery to me because he bounces between Trubisky and Foles or Trubisky or Foles. I don't know that either one of these quarterbacks are very good in this system, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, I understand Foles is a Super Bowl ring. I think Foles is probably better off, as you said, he's may as well just do the back nine and call it a day, get a Super Bowl ring and wear it while he's playing golf. I think Foles is relatively done. Is he a serviceable backup? Maybe somewhere who really needs and desperately needs a backup quarterback, but I don't think that he's it. When you look at Trubisky, just something wrong about his football IQ. I understand he's athletic. I've seen him outside the pocket. I've seen him make throws on the run. I've seen him get in the end zone. The problem that I have with Trubisky is the football IQ, the football situations that arise in front of him that he's not able to capitalize on when there's clear daylight and looking. In other words, to be a solid quarterback, you have to look at the field. It can't be just this one vision, one-dimensional view. And I think that Trubisky doesn't understand his checkdowns. He doesn't want to get rid of the ball when he needs to. He's not a rookie anymore. It's not as if he's, Justin Herbert, who knows how to throw the ball away, or a second-year player in Josh Allen, who just knows also when to throw the ball away in a very timely manner. Yesterday, one was a little bit questionable, but it was broken up by a 49ers defender on the sidelines. He was exiting out. So he doesn't make those very often. Why? Because he knows that could be ultimately picked off. I don't know that Matt Nagy can really find the quarterback that he's looking for. I don't know that he is going to be one of the better eyes when it comes to drafting. And I just don't know that with the record of 5-7 that they have and consistently bad, it reminds me of, I hate to bring it up because it's not really relevant to Matt Nagy, but is relevant to the organization in regards to quarterbacks. Remember Jay Cutler's contract that he signed way back in the day was a complete hyperbole and disaster for that organization, for the team. I think they're still paying him to this day. I think right now he's watching Tuesday night football. Can't believe I just said Monday night because now Tuesday night's obviously effective. I think Matt Nagy could be on his way out. I don't know that he has that momentum as a head coach. What are your thoughts about Matt Nagy? Does he stay or go?
He's gone. As soon as Ryan Pace is fired, so does Matt Nagy. Look, the problem with the whole thing is that when Ryan Pace took the job with the Chicago Bears, Matt Nagy wasn't even hired at this point, and he brought up Mitchell Trubisky. And you watch the way that Mitchell Trubisky and Matt Nagy worked together was like oil and water after 2018. He had a terrific season in 2018, but then after that, it became too predictable. The chemistry wasn't there, and that's why Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace brought in Nick Foles to try and figure out something at this point. But Matt Nagy has had his shot. It's not good. He's not a very good head coach, and he's going to have to move on. I do believe he will be back as an offensive coordinator somewhere. He actually is a very intelligent offensive mind, but he just doesn't fit with Chicago. They are a run first, play defense kind of team. They're not this high flying, tell the papers of what you saw tomorrow kind of offense. They're not Eric Coryell here. They're not what the Packers are right now. They're not what the Chiefs are right now. And that's what Matt Nagy wants. Matt Nagy wants that Chiefs style offense, and it just doesn't mix with what Ryan Pace brought in. I mean, come on, outside of Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller is too inconsistent. You got Jimmy Graham off the NFC North trash bin. You got Cole Kmet, who's actually been decent as a rookie, but there's just nothing there. Daryl Mooney has been okay, but I'm really not like saying to myself, oh, he's the next great wide receiver. And that falls on Ryan Pace. And it's not just that, though. It's the offensive line. Charles Leno should not have been paid $42 million. They should have not given a contract to the turnstile Bobby Massey. And that's a problem. So when you can't even be able to fix that, and then you can't even figure out how to do your running game, when you have a very good running back in the making with David Montgomery, second year out of Iowa State, that's a problem. And your defense can't be out there for 40 minutes of a 60-minute football game. They will be giving up points. And that's what happened with the Packers. That's what happened against the Lions. And that's going to continue as long as Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are there. They have to move on. They got to start from square one and figure out, is this a run first play defensive team, or are we going to try and duplicate the Kansas City Chiefs? I don't know.
Well, in order to really duplicate. Right. No, and you're absolutely right. You raise a really good point, because you cannot be another team. You have to be your team. You have to build fundamental components within the organization that will allow for you to draft the guys that you're looking for that fit your system. If you don't have an identity, you're throwing something at the wall to make it stick. That's been the problem with Chicago this entire time. And you can have this conversation about all these losing franchises, including Jacksonville. You throw them in the mix as well with Kana. I'm not sure if he knows what he's doing. And Doug Marrone, I don't know what the heck Doug Marrone's doing either. But at the end of the day, when you look at these track records of these teams, these organizations, these coaches who are either not understanding, recognizing the talents and the strengths that these players have in order to capitalize on them to make your team, put your team in a winning position in order to get to where you want to be, which is what? Winning a Super Bowl. It's not going to happen with the guys in place. Last but not least, I want to talk about Pete Carroll. Now, look, I understand Pete Carroll, USC alum. He was there with Reggie Bush. He was there with Mark Sanchez. He did great things there. I have my own personal opinions in regards to Pete Carroll. I'm not a huge Pete Carroll fan. I understand fundamentally he's done an absolutely fantastic thing while in Seattle, already winning a Super Bowl with Russell Wilson under center. My problem is that for some reason, somehow, some way, this Seahawks defense does not show up when they need to, because they don't have the right personnel on the field. And it has a lot to do with what Pete Carroll's decision is in regards to what pieces are on the field through the defensive coordinator. Pete Carroll has had a good time. It's been a ride for him in Seattle, but I think it's not a culture change. They have a very solid culture. Look at Russell Wilson. He's a shining example of what that culture in Seattle has built. The problem is that you don't have the fundamental pieces to stop getting gouged defensively. And you need to give this offense a little bit more weaponry, taller guys, bigger guys, better pancake blockers, better gap openers, just bigger, younger, more athletic components. And I mean, Russell Wilson, the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. as well as a guy who runs for his life and has to throw up 45 points in order to even win a game every single time he gets out on the field. I think Pete Carroll's time is coming near to where he needs to go.
I think that is not a crazy thought. I mean, he has an excellent record. He has won the West more times than I could think. But yeah, you come to that point where it's time to move on. And I think that also you could see a make or break year also for John Schneider, general manager as well. He's done a great job with this, but now it's starting to age. You're no longer the Legion of Boom. You don't have Cam Chancellor. You don't have Richard Sherman anymore. You don't have Earl Thomas. So you're a shell of yourself, and you have gone through multiple defensive coordinators. Gus Bradley did a great job. Dan Quinn did a great job. But then Ken Norton comes in. And Ken Norton was a superb football player when he was with Dallas and San Francisco back in his days. But if you look at what he did with the Raiders, they were ranked 26th, 29th, 32nd. And while he is a defensive mind that you want to actually look at, you got to look at the substance. It's style over substance right now. They don't have the personnel. You talk about his style also getting old. I agree. Brian Schottenheimer, I think he's on his way out as well. This offensive line, I'm so sick and tired of watching Russell Wilson in the shotgun hike the football, and he has like maybe 2 seconds before he has to roll out on the outside and try and make something happen. Russell Wilson is going into his prime now. You have to be able to find a guy who is going to work well with him, where he believes that this offensive line is going to be helpful to him and he could be able to work within. It's possible. I like what you're saying about Pete Carroll. Maybe it's next year. Maybe it's this year. I don't know. I do believe, though, if the Seahawks do make the playoffs, they might just push this off another year, kind of like what the Packers do with Mike McCarthy. So while it is a good thought now, it's not a crazy thought, but I don't think that's going to happen until at least 2022.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I look at Pete Carroll being on the hot seat just from a defensive standpoint, because again, he gets the final say as to who's on the roster, who's not on the roster. Don't forget, free agency came and went. There have been plenty of guys he could have easily acquired to fill in for those voids where, you know, you have that kind of pass rush. And again, they're very suspect on pass rush. Do they get in? Do they not? Do they fake it? Is it a fire blitz? You know, who do they? There's just too many questions and too much inconsistency, at least on the defensive portion of that Seattle team. Now, look, I'm not going to say that they have anything better than there's, you know, star wide receiver out there making things done in DK Metcalf. The problem that I have is that they have no other real alternatives to spread that ball around with. They don't have this fantastic tight end that's just going to grab that ball or do some blocking for DK as he travels downfield 25 yards. They need more. They could be one of the first outs in regards to if the playoffs started today. Why? Because they give up a ton of yards, and Russell Wilson's always running for his life behind that offensive line. So could Pete Carroll go? Maybe. I think if they get to the playoffs, they may suspend that. I think you're definitely on point there. Jake Rongholt joins me. Jake, tell everybody where they can find you, where they can hit you up. You're a great guy, great personality, and I love the energy.
Yeah, Rudy, you're like a brother to me. You guys can find me on Twitter at Both Sides Sports. You can also catch my Turning Points podcast. It's across the internet, Spotify, Anchor, iTunes. Please leave a comment if you go on iTunes. We tell both sides of the story in the sports world, and we have great guests. We just had Zach Pearson on from Bear Report. I was like a psychiatrist to him for the last, we did like a 25-minute interview. We've had a lot of people, Pack-A-Day. We've had Andy Herman on there. We've had Calvin Watkins from the Dallas Morning News, and we just tried to get down in the nitty gritty to a lot of getting away from that one take kind of atmosphere that we have grown up to, kind of like the first take here. We look at both sides of the story. So when I talk about your Steelers, while we did get the game, beating Baltimore 19-14, I said, flip the script. This team is now hereby vulnerable, and they are going to be vulnerable now because there are chinks in the armor. And Rudy, the biggest loss they had this year, it was Bud Dupree. You can't lose Bud Dupree. That's like a brother in arms to TJ Watt. And now it's just TJ Watt and, Alex Hyde and what was it, Highsmith. He did okay.
Yeah.
But, that depth chart is now starting to be tested. And I'm very curious to see what happens with Buffalo at that point. So Anyway, that's what I was saying. Both sides of the story. Turning Points podcast. We do it once a week, and we have big time guests on, including your own Rude Dog himself, Rudy Reyes, will be on next week. So there you go.
Thanks
There
a
you
lot,
go.
Jake.
Shameless
I
plug
appreciate
for you,
it, man.
Rudy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, you're definitely welcome. We can come on anytime. You know, there's always two sides to every story, but there's always three truths. His version, and the truth somewhere right in the middle of it. So thanks, Jacob, man. I really appreciate having you on. So we posted on TheRudeDogShow.com. You can check it out basically anywhere. It'll be blasted on Twitter, maybe even LinkedIn if you're a fan of that. If you happen to cruise that app, I know I do. I peruse it quite frequently. Check it out. There'll be an audio version as well that will be part of the Rude Dog Show podcast that'll be posted. Thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it, Jacob, and we'll see you again.
All right. Take care, Rudy.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Thank you. And happy holidays, everybody.